I'm Chris Kenny. Well, the winner is all of us, I reckon. The Olympics heading again down under is in just over a decade is when they're going to lob in Brisbane and southeast Queensland. I reckon that's pretty exciting stuff, isn't it? It's a feather in the cap of this nation to have 3 Olympics spread over just 75 years. That's more than our fair share. It's also terrific, of course, for Brisbane because every city that hosts the Games is etched into history, it's etched into the tourism brochures and the public consciousness for decades to come. It heralds the arrival of a global city, really, so that's something quite significant now for Queensland. They've got to make the most of it. Now, despite all our excitement and enthusiasm, I've got to say this was always in the bag. There was effectively no other bidder. So as I said yesterday, previewing the decision, there was really no suspense. It was a formality in Tokyo. So it was kind of funny, wasn't it, watching the official delegation last night putting on a show in Japan, sort of fake surprise and jubilation at the announcement. I guess they felt they had to.
The Games of the 35th Olympiad are awarded to Brisbane, Australia.
Yeah, the old elbow tap, etc. It wasn't quite as stunning as that Sydney announcement all those years ago, was it? Back in Australia, the Prime Minister got in on the act. He'd made his presentation to the Olympic delegates via a video link. And I stand by my call from the other day that the others should have stayed home too. Queensland Labor Premier Annastacia Palaszczuk, the Liberal Federal Sports Minister Richard Colbeck and the LNP Brisbane Lord Mayor Adrian Schrinner all have a nerve heading over for this lay-down misère when their own governments are blocking Australians from going overseas and, more importantly, blocking thousands even from coming home. They could have all been online and asked Ash Barty and Paddy Mills to turn up in the flesh or something. Still, having gone to Tokyo, they've got to do it right. They've got to meet the right people, learn as much as they can, which is why the Olympics Supremo, John Coates, took the unusual step of bossing around these senior politicians in front of the world's media last night.
You are going to the opening ceremony. I'm still the Deputy Chair of the Candidate Leadership Group, and so far as I understand, that there will be an opening and a closing ceremony in 2032, and all of you have got to get along there and understand the traditional parts of that, what's involved in an opening ceremony. So none of you are staying behind and hiding in your rooms, all right?
I don't want to offend anybody, so...
Never been to an opening ceremony at the Olympic Games, have you? You don't know the protocols? I think it's part of it's a very important lesson for everyone here.
Now, that was pretty weird stuff. Coates was throwing around his weight, really, in a kind of rude and condescending way. It's pretty hard to see whether people are smiling or grimacing with those masks on, of course. But we all know he was right. What would be the point of sitting in your room? Once you've made the decision to head up there, it's no point pretending you're too humble to get out and about, pretending it was all about securing the Games and then hunkering down. No, that's just playing a game of political spin. Having gone to Tokyo, these people need to see everything and everyone they can. Running an Olympics is a pretty complex operation and the decision-making starts immediately. But I've got to say, I noticed this take from Annabel Crabb at the ABC, who said this was a diamond-perfect example of a man who believes his own job, priorities and worldview are universal and another person's failure to adopt them are evidence of stupidity or incomprehension on her part. Amazing to see it performed publicly, said Crabb. Now, Coates was abrupt, arrogant, even out of line, but he is the expert and he was right. And the suggestion of sexism from Crabb and others overlooks the fact that Coates was not lecturing just Palaszczuk, but Richard Colbeck and Adrian Schrinner too. He was admonishing and issuing instructions to 3 people, 2 of whom were men. So it's hard to invoke sexism, isn't it? Funny thing is that some observers believe it was Palaszczuk pulling the strings anyway. They speculate it was a Machiavellian ploy by the Queensland Premier putting up the Olympics boss to get her out of the jam and get her to the opening ceremony. How clever would that have been? Who knows, maybe that's a sexist claim too. But Coates has put out a statement today saying his comments have been misinterpreted. I think everyone can see them and they'll make up their own minds. Anyway, opening ceremonies are a pretty great thing when it comes to Olympic Games. Forgive me for indulging my own memories, but here's a little pic of me at the Sydney opening ceremony back in 2000. I was very lucky to visit Sydney a couple of times during the Games and attend the opening ceremony sitting with the Senegal women's basketball team. It's a long story, believe me. I wrote about it once in the Oz, but anyone who was in Sydney back then knows how special it was. Sydney is always great. Hell, I was out in the city today. It's even great in lockdown. But the vibe, the friendliness and the excitement during the 2000 Games was something else. And I've got no doubt Queensland will deliver that same sort of Australian openness and friendliness and good organisation without being overly regimented. I've got to say, my older kids were just old enough to experience some of the Olympic feeling back in 2000. And to think that my younger children now, who thanks to COVID haven't even seen a decent Olympics on TV yet, well, they'll get to experience these Queensland Games as teenagers. That's a really nice thought. And that's something all kids and young adults in this country can look forward to now once we get out of this crazy COVID situation.